Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Proof of Waste podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking with Yvonne Taylor, co-founder of the National Coalition Against Cryptomining and vice president of the Seneca Lake Guardian Group. Thank you so much for joining us, Yvonne. I really appreciate you being here. A huge fan of your work. And I wanted to start by asking, how did you get into this advocacy work? Where are you? That kind of stuff.
Well, sure. So I call myself sort of an accidental activist because the painting you see behind me is a road that goes down to Seneca Lake, where my family has owned land for generations. As it was passed down through, I inherited a very small sliver of that land, and I wanted to build my year-round home there. This was about in 2010, and I learned that a gas and oil company had purchased the salt plant across the lake for me, not to mine salt, but to turn that area into the largest fracked gas storage and transport hub in the northeastern United States. And I kept saying, this is a very, very bad idea. The caverns go under the lake. The lake is a drinking water source for over 100,000 people. It was going to change everything we knew and loved about our area. And I said, somebody's got to do something about this. But nobody was doing anything. So we founded back then what was called Gas Free Seneca, single issue organization to fight off this multi-billion-dollar gas and oil corporation. It took us 8 years.
Wow.
But we won.
Wow.
And
That's
through that,
stick-to-itiveness.
yeah, it was a long, hard-fought battle. It took so many people to come together to fight this thing, but we did it. And from that, we had made so many connections and learned so much that we went on to form Seneca Lake Guardian, which is who we are today. And our mission is to protect and preserve the clean air, clean water, and thriving economic engine in the area, which is agriculture and tourism, for generations to come. So that's how we got started. We're in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of New York State. When people think of New York, they think city. We are very rural. We have trillions of gallons of fresh water, beautiful, lush waterfalls. We grow lots of grapes, and that has made us a world-class wine and tourist destination for millions of people, and we want to keep it that way.
Wow. And yeah, to that point of being rural and having a lot of fresh water segues into Bitcoin mining. So how did you get into the fight against proof of waste crypto miners?
So it all started when a defunct coal burning power plant along the shores of Seneca Lake was purchased, resurrected to burn fossil fuels, natural gas. And it was not to provide power to the public, but to provide power to all of the cryptocurrency mining machines that they were putting into place. So
And
it was
what's that? The company that bought that coal plant?
Was called Atlas Holdings. And the facility is called Greenidge Power Plant.
And when did that happen? What year did they buy that retired coal plant and bring it back to life, solely to mine Bitcoin?
Yeah, it was about 2015 when it got purchased. And then they slowly started adding in these ASIC miners. I think they're close to having 30,000 of them right now. But we didn't even know what cryptocurrency was or cryptocurrency mining. We had to learn very quickly. And the more we learned, the more alarmed we grew. And we were very concerned about the environmental impacts of this facility on our air and our water.
And speaking of the water, how did y'all find out how much water they're using? Because I understand these kind of facilities are extremely water intensive. So as living on the lake and having so much to protect, what is the water situation like with Greenidge?
So their permit allows them to withdraw up to 139 million gallons of water out of our lake every single day, and then discharge it hot back into the lake at temperatures up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. So this lake is known as the freshwater trout capital of the world. Trout get stressed at temperatures over 70 degrees. And here we are dumping this water hot into where it's a trout stream that feeds right into Seneca Lake. Along with that, we've been already experiencing problems with what they call harmful algal blooms, which is a toxin to both humans and animals. And we know that warm water is a contributing element to the outbreak of harmful algal blooms. As a matter of fact, there was a record-breaking HABs incident on the northwestern quadrant of the lake where the Greenidge facility is located last October. Wow. So we're very concerned because many of the people, like myself, we have a pipe that goes from our house down the bank right into the lake. That's our drinking water.
Oh, wow.
And there are many of us who use that lake as our resource for water. It is also a drinking water source for 100,000 people along the lake through municipalities. But people like me who live around the lake draw their water directly out of the lake. So if there's a harmful algal bloom, we can't use our water at all. We can't flush toilets. We can't run water because that stuff will get up into our pipes.
Right.
And it's a toxin. We can't let our animals drink out of it. They can die. So it's a major, major issue, the water.
Was there a specific point in time when you were learning about this new facility coming to your backyard that you were like, oh my God, we have to do something about this? Or was it like more of a gradual step up the more you learned?
I think, nobody was really happy that this old power plant was being resurrected along the shores of the lake anyway. So we weren't too thrilled about that. But when we learned that it had no public benefit, that it was solely for a private use to power. I mean, what a great idea, right? If you own an energy intensive business, why not buy yourself your very own power plant to produce the power you need?
Yeah. Wow.
But we were very opposed to it when we learned that, and started fighting immediately.
Yeah. And speaking of it being a coal plant, can you talk about the air pollution that's going on solely for Bitcoin mining in your area?
Yes. So obviously fossil fuel burning emits greenhouse gases. And as a matter of fact, this power plant's greenhouse gas emissions have continuously increased over time. They started out we have records from 2020. They emitted about 490 million pounds of CO2 equivalents in 2020. And then now in 2023, it's up to 800 million pounds. Wow. Now,
is a saying that I am constantly, hollering to the void. There is no such thing as enough in proof of waste Bitcoin mining. They will just keep increasing their consumption, and they do not care about the consequences to people or planet. So that is a really great example. Like, they brought a coal plant that was retired back from the dead to guess and throw away numbers in hopes of hitting the Bitcoin lottery. And there is no public benefit. Can you talk about the supposed benefits like jobs and economic, revenue from this, the promises that this industry makes?
Absolutely. And that is the problem, right? As I mentioned, we are this world-class tourist destination, but we're also very rural, as I mentioned. And a lot of the towns surrounding the Finger Lakes are very, very small, low-income populations. And so you get this slick company that comes in and talks to the decision makers of your little community about, we're going to bring in this amazing business. We're going to bring jobs, tax revenue. It's going to be a big benefit to your community. And the decision makers fall for it. They fall all over themselves for it oftentimes, because we need jobs in this area. But the reality is that we aren't exactly sure how many people they actually employ, but it's far, far fewer than what they promised. It doesn't, these machines are fully automated. It doesn't require a lot of people on site. It probably employs potentially the average of about your average McDonald's franchise, with far fewer benefits. Like, you can't even get a Big Mac there, right? I mean, it's just
Yeah. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I am constantly amazed by the lack of critical thinking and investigation that our local and state officials will just rubber stamp these these facilities without really digging deep and asking them the question, are these claims they're making true? Here in Navarro County, our economic development director gets paid $100,000 a year, which is a lot for an indigent county. And I asked him, did you do an economic impact study on this, the biggest project to ever come to Navarro County? And he said, well, Riot Platforms did one. And I'm like, so you did not do your job, like the absolute basic reason you're here. So it's really frustrating when they just buy it hook, line, and sinker, and then the locals are the ones left having to do all the work to unring that bell. How do you go about, as the co-founder of the National Coalition, how do you go about finding other affected communities, reaching out, creating this coalition that we now have, like a dozen states, 20 plus communities represented? How did that start? And who've you, met along the way that have been integral to this organization flourishing and growing?
Yeah, I guess that motto, think locally, act globally, is not a cliche to me. So while we were fighting cryptocurrency mining in the state of New York, we realized quickly that even if we were successful at shutting crypto out of New York State, these miners are so mobile that they would just pick up their machines and go somewhere else that was more friendly to them.
Right.
And that doesn't solve our global climate problem and all of the energy intensive use of this industry. So, in the very beginning, I started out finding newspaper articles about communities that may be experiencing a similar situation. I first learned of a group in Morgantown, Virginia, that were fighting a proposed cryptocurrency mine. And I reached out and I was able to get in touch with them. I'm a school teacher by day, by the way. So on my spring break, I got in the car and I drove to Morgantown, and I met with about 16 of the community members there that were concerned. And I realized, a lot of the issues that were impacting our community were about to impact theirs. Wow. We shared stories, we exchanged information and ideas. From there, we headed south to Spartanburg, South Carolina, where we knew there was another cryptocurrency mine, and met with some other people there. And then slowly, it's very difficult to find these communities because the crypto industry is very under the radar. They don't want people to know where they're going and what they're doing. They call themselves data centers to try and make it sound a little better than crypto mining does. And they often slip into communities sort of in the dark of night, before anybody knows what's going on. So a lot of it has been just picking through media to see if there's a community who's speaking out. And from those two communities, we have now grown, as you mentioned, to 13 different states with 23 different communities that are impacted by crypto mining. And we're also supported by some very important and renowned environmental organizations at this point.
Yeah, and that is how y'all found us, the Texas Coalition, before we were the Concerned Citizens of Navarro County. And
Yes.
we had been, banging our heads against the wall and screaming into the void for a full month before the news finally picked it up. And that's how y'all found us. So I'm incredibly grateful and appreciative of y'all starting this group and then including us in it. And I feel like there is becoming universal understanding about how bad this industry is, and that has so much to do with your work and your advocacy. So thank you very much for that.
And yours.
During this 15, so that's like almost over like 10 years that you've been dealing with Greenidge. That's incredible. Have you had any wins in this process in your advocacy?
We absolutely have, yes. We actually turned this little power plant on the western shore of Seneca Lake into the test case for how other decommissioned or underutilized power plants in New York State could potentially fall. And we sounded the alarm. We reached out to statewide environmental organizations across the state and said, you need to know about this industry. You need to hear about this. This is how we could undermine all of our climate goals in an instant. And through that advocacy and the collaboration that then ensued across New York State, we were able to get a partial moratorium on cryptocurrency mining in the state. It's the leading moratorium in the nation on cryptocurrency mining.
Yeah.
It prohibits the use of fossil fuel burning power plants to mine for cryptocurrency. And it also involves an environmental impact statement on the industry and an analysis and a study to determine whether or not New York State should implement a full-on ban on this particular proof of work industry.
What phase of that investigation are they in? How have they determined that?
They issued their final scoping document, which we were able to comment on. And then from there, they will issue what they call a draft environmental impact statement. And then the public gets another opportunity to review that and comment again.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but not only that, but because the Greenidge power plant became this test case, when it was up for renewal of its Title V air permit, the state rallied around together and submitted 4,000 comments to the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation, urging for the denial of this permit. And guess what? We won.
Woo-woo.
So the Greenidge facility is now operating with a denied Title V air permit. And that is, I think, truly the saddest part of our legal system, is that they have found a way to continue operating while they appeal. And so 2 years it's been since their permit has been denied, and they're still harming our community.
And wasn't the appeal struck down? Didn't a judge just said that is a legitimate denial of that air quality permit? So how are they still operating?
They're very nefarious. They're a very nefarious company. They don't know when enough is enough. And they, as long as they're operating, they're making money. They're making a profit off of us at our expense. And they have claimed that they're going to appeal yet again, even though the decision for the denial was upheld.
Right.
They still get another bite at the apple, they think, to file an Article 78 and challenge that decision in state court. So, and it's a little bit unprecedented, because typically in our state, they have, like, if they're going through this appeals process, generally speaking, there would be something called an issues conference, where you get both sides, legal teams to come together. It's like a court trial, and you have experts testify, and there, it's a kind of a long process. Can be very drawn out, can take years to determine, a decision. And our legal team said, let's skip that whole process. None of these issues are worth adjudication. We do not need to have an issues conference. And besides, if you do, then, the reason the Title V air permit was denied, I should back up and say this, is because it is a violation of our bold climate law in New York State. It's called the CLCPA, the Community Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And it is designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And this power plant, serving no purpose but emitting millions of tons of CO2 into the atmosphere, is in violation of our law. And that is why it was upheld in court. Right. But Greenidge is dragging it out some more because they found a loophole that says, even though it was upheld, there's another way to continue operating. Of course, we're gonna fight it still. We're gonna argue that they need to shut down during the appeals process. We'll see how that goes.
Right. Yeah. Nefarious is a great word to describe the proof of waste industry as a whole. They're extremely inherently dishonest. They will say anything, do anything to keep the scam going. And this is a great example of how, I talk about when Riot broke ground here in Navarro County, the one single tiny little permit they were responsible for getting, a stormwater runoff. When they announced they broke ground, we went and asked the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, did they get this one tiny little permit? And they hadn't. So they will cut every corner. They will shirk their responsibilities and duties to the public as long as, those numbers just keep on churning and they keep on guessing. What is one of your worst fears about the industry or this particular facility?
My worst fear about the industry is that they are spreading like a cancer across the country, and they're moving rapid fire. My other concern is that if Congress does enact a law that somehow legitimizes cryptocurrency mining, that we're going to see an even larger explosion of the industry. And then obviously all of the related harms that we've been talking about would increase.
Yeah.
And I've already mentioned my huge concern with the Greenidge facility in particular, that it is, it's just exponentially increasing its CO2 equivalents, right, and, harming our community and beyond.
I was going to ask you about the comparison between your state and Texas. You did cover that incredible, monumental environmental protection law that New York has. I suspect as Bitcoin miners aren't flocking to New York as much anymore. They're just, do you see new mines coming online in New York State?
I think that the moratorium did have a chilling effect on the industry. There are still cryptocurrency miners in operation that don't use fossil fuel powered plants. There's another power plant in North Tonawanda, which is just outside of Buffalo, where they're trying to do a similar thing as they did in Greenidge. We're also supporting their community and fighting that. But, in New York State, despite this moratorium, in 2023, households and small businesses paid an extra $204 million and $92 million annually, respectively, in just upstate New York due to increased electricity from cryptocurrency mining. Right. So, they're pulling from the grid. They're using up our precious green electrons that the public should be using as we transition away from fossil fuels. Yeah. So any way you slice it, we're still struggling here in New York State.
Yeah, I think that's a really great important point to make, is that number one, even when Bitcoin miners are using green energy, that energy could be used for productive purposes. It could be used to lower energy bills for everybody else, their consumers, and it could be lessening our dependence on fossil fuels. Not only is it a waste for the regular consumers, but even adding any kind of energy, be it green or fossil fuels, adding any energy to the Bitcoin proof of waste algorithm increases energy consumption for the entirety of the blockchain. And so even by adding green energy, you're actually still increasing dirty fossil fuels, because that is the main source. They like to greenwash and say, oh, look, we're adopting solar and wind, but the majority of energy used to guess and throw away numbers on the Bitcoin blockchain is fossil fuels. So when they put on those green energies, it still increases the difficulty, which is just a manipulative way to say the energy consumption of the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's a waste. Everything about this industry is a total waste.
Yep.
What do you wish everyone knew about Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining?
You know, I come at this from mainly an environmental perspective. I know there are other reasons why we should be concerned about cryptocurrency in terms of their fraudulent behavior, some of the dark money that's involved. But as far as I'm concerned, the biggest issue is the energy consumptive nature of this industry. I mean, compared to other sources, the Bitcoin industry right now could power 5.1 million US households for a year. You could charge 11.2 billion iPhones every day for a year with the same amount of energy that Bitcoin is using. You could power Google for 2 years and 4 months with the same amount of energy that cryptocurrency mining is using. And for what?
Right.
So I wish people would get that.
Right. That is something that I point out constantly. One of the things that just irks me so bad about this industry is them calling themselves data centers. They're not data centers. There is nothing that the general public is actually utilizing on the Bitcoin blockchain. If Bitcoin disappeared yesterday, the absolute overwhelming vast majority of humans on the planet wouldn't be affected whatsoever. If Google went down, if AWS went down, if Facebook or Twitter went down, billions of people would notice. And so this disproportionate, unjustifiable consumption of energy compared to the actual number of users, which even that, like everything in the crypto industry, is extraordinarily overinflated. We know for a fact that most people who have Bitcoin wallets or crypto wallets have multiples. So I have been asking the Texas Blockchain Council, which is the lobbyist group for Bitcoin miners here, how many Texans are actually utilizing Bitcoin? Because every Texas energy consumer and taxpayer is picking up the tab on these guys. But like, what is the actual percentage of Texans who are playing the Bitcoin lottery? So it's so disproportionate in its consumption versus its utility. And then when you talk about the utility, we're talking some of the worst crimes in the world are being perpetrated on the Bitcoin blockchain. So you just add insult to injury on these things. I mean, it's inexcusable. I really cannot wrap my head around why the American government has allowed this to perpetuate for so long. I can understand why Texas would, but the United States is a little harder for me to understand. How have your local officials responded? How has your state? I mean, we've talked about the state of New York, but when this first happened, how did you find out? Was your local government involved? Did they act like this was a good thing? What happened there?
Yeah, so the local response has actually been mixed. Unfortunately, the folks in the town who were voted to represent the constituents there, as I mentioned, fell all over themselves to welcome Greenidge in with open arms. The surrounding communities, who, some of the elected officials are a little more astute and willing to listen to, the facts instead of get snowed by the promises that the industry was making, were opposed from the beginning. Beyond the local officials, as I mentioned, we are a world-class tourist destination. The wine and tourism industry in our region brings in $3 billion a year into New York State's economy and supports 60,000 jobs. So the wine and tourism industry came to a point where they all spoke out together and said, this is a bad idea for our region. It is completely antithetical to what some have spent generations building. And we all banded together very nicely as a community to oppose this project. And that did get the attention of many of our elected officials.
That's awesome.
Statewide, as I mentioned, one of our biggest champions was Assemblymember Anna Kellis. She led the charge. She's a brilliant human being. She's a scientist. She looked into the issue. She got it right away. And she began to introduce this moratorium. She helped educate and inform her state colleagues. And that's how we were able to get the moratorium in the first place.
That's
on
awesome.
on the federal level, New York State's Senator Gillibrand, who has been a champion of the Finger Lakes region in the past, unfortunately, she's taking, I think she's number 2 on the list of the most lobbying dollars received from the crypto industry.
Wow.
And sadly, she has turned her back on the people in New York State who are being impacted by this.
Yeah, that was really shocking. I've been a fan of Senator Kirsten Gillibrand for years, and it is so shocking to see those folks that really should know better, but are captured by the industry and lobbying dollars. And if that's not, a case for getting money out of politics, I don't know what is. How would you grade the federal government on their response to Bitcoin mining and proof of waste in America, and then flooding after China kicked them out in 2021?
Yeah, I would say the overall the grade would be an F. Sadly, the cryptocurrency lobbying industry is putting more or equal to the pharmaceutical industry into lobbying our congressional representatives.
Yeah.
And because they're very powerful and have so much money, Congress is only really hearing from them and only really hearing their side. And therefore, a lot of our federal representatives are buying into it and supporting the industry. With the exception of some, I will say that there are some representatives who are willing to take a more discerning look at the industry and see it for what it really is, which is a fraudulent form of virtual currency that is not necessary. It's harming our environment. It's a threat to our U.S. dollar and our U.S. banking system. So I won't say everyone gets an F, but I would say the majority does.
Yeah, I'm constantly surprised. Like, I'm shocked when a U.S. representative touts crypto or Bitcoin, because like Bitcoin's stated goal, these maximalist Bitcoin maximal, their stated goal is to topple the American financial system and destroy the US dollar and become the global currency reserve. Now, that concept is completely absurd because Bitcoin can only do 7 transactions a second globally. Compare that to, Visa 35,000 second globally. But just the fact that they are overtly stating they want to harm the US financial system, which is one of the reasons why we are a global powerhouse. When I hear a US representative say, yeah, Bitcoin, like my Senator Ted Cruz, my House Representative Cody Harris, my governor Greg Abbott, it is extraordinarily seditious, treasonous technology that was purposely created to circumvent taxes, sanctions. So right after Texas, the second largest entity mining Bitcoin is Russia, so they can evade all of the sanctions placed upon them for invading Ukraine. I cannot comprehend why any U.S. elected official would say this seditious technology is like, the bee's knees. It really defies explanation, other than, of course, the lobbying dollars that they're getting.
Yeah.
So
And I think that's why it's so important for the National Coalition Against Crypto Mining to exist and to keep growing,
yeah.
because we don't have the dollars that the crypto industry has, but we do have our voices. Our collective voices do have power. We need to use those voices and continue educating and informing our elected officials from the local level on up to the federal level, and even globally, if we can, so that people understand the true nature and the true dangers that this industry presents.
Yeah, and I often say all we have to do is educate people, and they're pretty much immediately on our side, unless they're already in the scam and then they need that Ponzi to keep going. But for the most part, I have been incredibly successful, getting people to join us, if in spirit, not actually doing stuff, by just telling them what Bitcoin mining is. So a huge portion of the Bitcoin mining lobbying is just disinformation and misinformation and making these incredible claims that will just never come true. And having this patina of complexity and, oh, well, it's super complex, so it must be legitimate. No, if you just strip away all the BS and say, these guys are using a mid-sized country's worth of energy and water to guess and throw away number in hopes of hitting an unsanctioned lottery. And they're destabilizing the grid. They're wasting incredible amounts of water. They're driving up everyone's energy bills, and they're torturing locals with noise pollution. There's very few people with a conscience who go, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Like, that sounds
brilliant.
legitimate. Yeah. I mean, so that is part of the reasons why we're doing this podcast, is to get stories like yours out there, how deeply secretive and opaque, how this industry is completely allergic to transparency. They sued the federal government to keep their energy consumption a secret. They have proliferated as far as they have because the mainstream media isn't asking these questions. They just take their word for it and essentially like copy and paste their press releases as if that's news. So it is very disturbing after 2 years of this. Oh my God, you've been doing it for 10 years, seeing how much it's proliferated because of a lack of critical thinking on the part of our elected officials, our newspapers, our news media, that kind of stuff. If there was one person you could talk to about Bitcoin mining, who would that be?
Well, this is a bit of a fantasy of mine, but if we had a time machine and I could go back in time, the person I would like to talk to is Satoshi Nakamoto, because I think that or whoever this person is, or the persons
Explain
are.
who that is for the not uninitiated, please. Yeah.
Yep. So apparently this fictitious or pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto is the person who is the founder or creator of Bitcoin. And I think the intentions were good. I think the intentions originally were, there are a lot of people who have been disenfranchised by a centralized banking system. And the intention was to allow those disenfranchised members of our community to have access to a decentralized system where they could build wealth. If I were able to go back in time and show him that the reality of what he created is now controlled by the very, very few, very, very rich, and all of the harms that this invention has created, I think he may think twice about what he started.
Yeah. There is some debate about whether, that it was created in earnest as, a way for disenfranchised people to access money versus it very possibly could have been created as a speculative asset. There are like emails that have been released from Satoshi that talk about, well, maybe we shouldn't talk about it as an investment. And I will always refer to David Columbia's book, The Politics of Bitcoin, Right-Wing Extremism as a Software. So, just this past week, Donald Trump came out for Bitcoin. He has now gotten $20 million in crypto donations for his campaign. And there was a lot of Bitcoin. There was like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of crypto and Bitcoin funneled to January Sixers. So there is like, I call this like deeply seditious technology. I personally don't believe that the inception was benign.
With some genuine intent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way
So,
you describe it, it's pure evil.
I mean, some things just are not good. And even if there are these tiny little edge cases where people have been helped by it, there is this mountain of negative externalities that just make it absolutely unjustifiable. So after 10 years and this Greenidge is still going, why do you keep fighting? Why, what keeps you going?
Because burning more fossil fuels and emitting more greenhouse gases into the air to make fake, needless money in the middle of a global climate crisis is literally insane. And I need to look myself in the mirror every day and know that I'm doing my part. To me, life isn't about skating through it passively and just, skipping along. And I think each of us has our own work to do. We need to find our passion and follow it. And that's why I keep fighting.
And what gives you hope in this industry?
Two things. One is all of the ordinary citizens across the country who are standing up against this nefarious industry in so many communities across the state to say no and to stand up for their rights. That inspires me, and I hope that that continues to grow. The second thing is that I mentioned I'm a school teacher. I work with at-risk youth who have experienced incredible hardships that children should never have to experience, and yet they demonstrate resiliency every single day, despite all odds. And my career has been revolving around providing these young individuals with the skills that they need to become successful in life. But what is the point of all of that if when they do become successful, they don't have a livable planet? So those are the kids that give me hope every single day to keep on working. And I find that incredibly inspirational.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to plug, or where can folks find you? Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience?
Well, I would love to have people consider, if you're out there, if you learn about cryptocurrency from this podcast, please join us. The National Coalition Against Crypto Mining. You can find us on Facebook. We have a website. Or if you'd like to talk to me more in depth, we're at senecalakeguardian.org. or you can send us an email at senecalakeguardian@gmail.com. I'm more than happy to share our experiences and brainstorm how we can fight this industry together.
Awesome. Yes. And in every episode of the podcast, in the descriptions, we will have a sign up form if you're interested in joining us. We need help. We need folks to not sit on the sideline. This is our future we're talking about here. And climate change is real. I'm in Texas. People don't really care about the environment down here, but climate change is real. We're watching extraordinary, extreme weather events happening on a daily basis. Just this month and last month here in Texas, we've had really, really bad storms. It's already been up in the 90s, mid 90s. Summer is coming earlier and earlier. This is one of the most wasteful, insane, like you said. I mean, I always just come back to the word insane. Absolutely unnecessary in the era of climate collapse and the sixth mass extinction event, wasting entire countries worth of water and energy to guess and throw away numbers in hopes of getting rich quick without doing any work is absolutely opposite of everything we should be doing. So thank you so much for your advocacy. Thank you so much for finding me and including me in the National Coalition. Thank you so much for being our guest, and your incredible advocacy and stick-to-itness. Like, I appreciate that you haven't just thrown up your hands and said, I quit. So that is huge.
Thank you. Thank you for all of your work and advocacy. It's greatly appreciated. Humbled and honored to be a part of it.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate y'all watching. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Proof of Waste podcast with Jackie Sawicki. Today we interviewed Yvonne Taylor, the co-founder of the National Coalition Against Cryptomining and vice president of Seneca Lake Guardian. Thank you so much, Yvonne. We really, really appreciate your work and your being with us today.
Thank you.